We now have tropical potential areas in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back at Meteo Mundo. It is nice to see you on a Friday. I hope you're doing well. Jam-packed video coming up for us here. We now have 3 different areas to be talking about for potential tropical development over the next 7 days to go along with some pretty active weather on this Friday and for the weekend ahead as well. As always, I love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section where you're viewing from, what the weather has been like. If you would like to leave a question, you got something specific about the forecast, feel free to drop it down there in the comment section below. Okay, so we're going to get into all the different areas. We have one now in the Northwest Gulf. Remember, I've been talking about that area over the last couple of days, and it's bringing some extremely heavy rain and flooding to upper Texas and Louisiana. We still have our main area here in the central Atlantic with a 40% chance of development into the Caribbean. And then we have our second wave that has come off of the West African coast with a 20% chance of development in that area. So 3 different ones we're going to be breaking down in this video ahead. When we take a look at the surface map, we also have a tropical wave right now in the central Caribbean. It's not developing, but that is still bringing some rowdy showers and storms to portions of our area. If you see this dotted line up here, that is a trough which extends north of that and has really brought some stormy weather to the Bahamas. There's again the potential area of low pressure in the Northwest Caribbean. There's our central Atlantic wave, and then there's our eastern Atlantic wave to get into. First thing we'll do here is kind of dive into what's going on in the area right now, and then we're going to get into the forecast with these tropical waves. But I do want to start off with what's been happening in the Bahamas on this Friday. Now, even really early this morning, these storms are going gangbusters in the central Bahamas, Exuma, Rum Cay, San Salvador, Long Island, Cat Island, all with opportunities for some pretty darn nasty weather. And again, this is just a 6-hour loop here, so this only takes us back to mid-morning, but even earlier in the morning, we had some really rowdy storms in this area. These continue, although they're beginning to fade a bit. We've had a couple of showers and storms up on the northwest side of the Bahamas, at least over the last couple of hours. Nothing extremely outrageous. And then a few more storms for the far southeast Bahamas towards the Acklins and the Turks and the Caicos. Now, last night, we had a pretty stormy looking sunset. It was a beautiful one, though. Our friend Craig Russell there from the Cat Island area of the Bahamas brought you that beautiful shot. You can obviously see sunset. That was on Thursday night, and you can see the thunderstorms there on the western side, or excuse me, at least on the left-hand side of that screen. I'm always talking about geographically when I'm looking at these, but Craig, appreciate that. Thanks a lot for that. Storms continue across Cuba at the hour as well. Again, very healthy activity here. Starting to get some of those storms sneaking back into Jamaica at the hour. It's been relatively tranquil most of the day, but now we are starting to get some of these going towards at least the northeast side of the island, east side of the island overall, Port Antonio, Morant Bay, some areas that have that opportunity. Storms are again developing out towards the west. We haven't had a lot of rain near the Kingston area yet, but if my friends in Kingston catch a shower today, let me know. But we've kind of had 2 different areas for our eastern sides, kind of up towards the northern coastline, and then again, the far western sides of the island, St. James, Hanover, Westmoreland parishes, best chance for storms. They've moved fairly quickly for today as well. Again, watch them develop in the mid-afternoon and then dump some rain and some lightning and then quickly work their way off towards the west. Still a lot of tropical moisture in play to try and bring our friends in the Cayman Islands some good rain chances today. Grand Cayman, a few spotty showers there. Same thing for Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. The opportunity will be with us. Scattered storms continue to keep going in the Yucatan right now. Again, overall, the farther north that you live in either the Yucatan or Central America, better chance for storms for today. We had a few storms rolling in towards the Tulum area, towards Cozumel, obviously towards Cancun, and then working their way off towards the west. Now, with this broad area that we're going to deep dive into a lot more, I just want to point out in the short term, upper Texas, coastal Louisiana, flooding is a big potential in these areas, regardless if this becomes anything tropical. As long as that area stays offshore, it's just going to be funneling in rich, deep tropical moisture. That's not going to change, and it's going to be a very wet, stormy pattern for those areas. Again, we're getting a few storms right now in Belize, portions of Honduras, not as widespread coverage as what we've had lately, but they're beginning to pop up here on this Friday afternoon. Portions of Honduras and Nicaragua starting to go gangbusters again over portions of Panama, guys, San Jose area, and then back, San Jose, Costa Rica, and then back down towards Panama City there in Panama overall. Again, all of this kind of moving in from east to west. We've seen more active weather today in portions of Hispaniola, especially on the DR side over Santo Domingo, trying to get over towards Santiago de los Caballeros at this point in time. Storms are offshore. Storms are also developing along the peninsula there of Haiti towards Lacai. Few showers and storms over portions of Puerto Rico. It's been another very hot day for my friends in Puerto Rico, so if you've caught some of these showers and storms, consider yourselves quite lucky. Basically developing inland and working their way off towards Mayaguez, southwest side of the island, and it's been relatively quiet for my friends in the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands. Now, just to point this out, there's an excessive heat watch in effect for kind of the northern, western, and southwestern coastlines of Puerto Rico and St. Croix for tomorrow, and maybe even extended into Sunday. So it's going to be very hot in these areas, and we need a few storms to try and cool things down. Unfortunately, the rain chance, at least through Sunday, is going to be relatively low. Just a isolated shower through the northern side of the Lesser Antilles today. We're talking about the Leeward Islands in general, Anguilla, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Bart, St. Kitts and Nevis, on over towards Montserrat, Guadeloupe. We get back down towards Martinique and areas off towards the south. That's where we've had a little bit better activity today. More moisture-laden air here in the Windward Islands, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada. A few showers trying to sneak towards Barbados. And by the way, guys, I was reading a story today about the sargassum seaweed in portions of Barbados, kind of on the southeast side of the island. If you've been impacted by that, let me know in the comments section below. It looks to be somewhat of a mess down there with some of that sargassum seaweed. Down towards Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, the thunderstorms developing at the hour. Nice moisture-laden air that's going to try and sweep across Nueva Esparta, and then eventually, not today, but late tomorrow and into Sunday and Monday to our friends in the ABC Islands. Bermuda's been relatively quiet for today. So again, that is the current setup for the showers and storms. So now we're going to get into the forecast. We're going to deep dive into those tropical areas, friends. As we're doing so, thank you so much for liking this video. Thank you for subscribing to Meteo Mundo. Appreciate you being part of our weather community. And again, please share this with your family and friends. Thank you for the ways that you can support us here at Meteo Mundo. The memberships, the super thanks, and in the description below as well. All right. So obviously we're going to focus in on this area in orange, but we are going to cover the area in the Gulf of Mexico, and then we're going to touch on this far eastern Atlantic one. 20% chance of development from the National Hurricane Center. Again, this wave came off the West African coast with deeper convection to begin with, right? And it's already holding together better and farther east than the waves we've seen over the last month, all right? Just a 20% chance of development, so far away at this point in time. Let's get into the wave that's going to have the most potential impacts for our area. Again, this is still a disorganized area of showers and storms. The chance has not gotten better than 40%. Believe it or not, last night, the Hurricane Center upped it to 50 and then dropped it back down to 40 for today. That's great news that this hasn't gotten a little bit better organized. And again, you can see on the enhanced invisible combination here, it's still a very elongated area of showers and storms. Also note that the development center from the development region from the Hurricane Center isn't until much closer to the Lesser Antilles. So the Hurricane Center does not believe that this is going to become a tropical depression anywhere between this X and the start of the orange polygon. That's a few more days. It could easily be into Monday, much closer to the Lesser Antilles, that we can have the first signs of development, okay? And then I also want you to notice that this area is very broad, over 7 days, and basically encompasses most of the Caribbean on almost a due west track. Again, this is the potential development area from the National Hurricane Center, but because it's now farther south and west, it does potentially impact more of our area for the week ahead. I want to go back to something I mentioned in yesterday's video. I said if I thought this particular system was going to be stronger, that it would probably head farther west before it turned north. And several of you commented in yesterday's video, Rusty, you're wrong. Stronger systems go north, weaker systems go west. And you know what? I love it. I love the question. I love you guys asking me it. I love the interaction. That's why I have a passion for this, to talk to you guys, to use this platform, so I appreciate it. In general, that statement is true, but there is nothing absolute about tropical meteorology in general as well, okay? And for this particular storm, as it tries to move into the Northeast Caribbean early next week, the winds in the Northeast Caribbean in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere are forecast to be out of the north-northeast. And so a stronger storm that's more vertically stacked, okay, would be more influenced by those north-northeast winds, and that's why I feel it would be pushed farther off towards the west. And all you have to do is go back to an example earlier this season to see what I'm talking about. Category 5 Hurricane Beryl, right, much stronger than Ernesto, but it moved due west south of Jamaica and into the Yucatan Peninsula, whereas Ernesto was a tropical storm over the Lesser Antilles, much weaker, but it had a much quicker northwest turn because the atmospheric conditions are different for every storm and they're different every day. And that's the big challenge, right? Forecasting the subtle changes that could drive these storms in different directions. But again, not necessarily stronger storms have to move north quicker. Now look, a couple of things are true about some of the comments. First of all, if a storm is extremely weak and only surface based, the easterly trade winds are going to drive that thing due west because there's no mid or upper level component to that storm. So it's just the easterly surface winds that are going to drive it west. And all storms at some point in time want to gain latitude. They want to go north. Believe it or not, that's their job, okay? They take the moisture-laden tropical air from the equatorial regions and they lift it north into the mid-latitudes to kind of try and even things out, okay? If it didn't, everything in the atmosphere would be all garbled up. We just happen to live in the areas, unfortunately, that these storms like to track, but they have a purpose, if you will, in the atmosphere, and that's to take the rich, moisture-laden air from the equatorial regions and drive them into mid-latitudes, okay? So I wanted to highlight that. So now we're gonna get into the forecast of this actual storm. And again, you have another question, drop it in. I love, again, that interaction. So it does look like that initially, this is gonna be relatively weak, and we'll look at the GFS reflectivity coming up. Still should be monitoring through the Lesser Antilles, okay? But we're gonna look at the GFS and the European models here coming up. But notice again, the Hurricane Center says development might not even happen until the central Atlantic or even the Western Atlantic. So let's take a look at the models. We'll start off with the European model, deterministic, okay? It does try and develop a very weak area kind of south of Puerto Rico towards Hispaniola, but nothing really truly beginning to wrap up until kind of just south of Haiti, okay? Now, first of all, this track and the tracks I'm going to show you on the models are much farther south and west, basically driving this storm, and this one does have the best potential to become the next named storm, Francine, basically right through the Caribbean, and then trying to then lift it north into the Gulf of Mexico, all right? So that's the deterministic model from the European. And as far as it goes, we just kind of sneak it into the southern side of the Gulf of Mexico. Now the ensemble members, again, same model, but now we have many, many different members running. And the difference is the initial conditions. That's why you have different outputs on the ensembles, because some of the initial conditions are estimated anyway. So we want to have a better idea of if maybe the deterministic model's initial conditions are wrong, what are some of the other subsets that could develop different outputs? And that's what we get on this ensemble product. I want you to notice, first of all, they are relatively clustered through at least the central, if not even the Western Caribbean, right? A few try and develop a storm near the Lesser Antilles, but more weight deeper into the Caribbean. And then we get a stronger storm closer to Jamaica, potentially, closer to Cuba, closer to Haiti, and then the spread becomes much more, right? Farther out in time, much deeper of a spread here. One more time on the European ensemble members. And again, we just start to see as it enters the Northwest Caribbean, bigger spread. Some into the Western Gulf, some into the Western Atlantic, some up the west coast of Florida, all of them getting stronger and beginning that northerly turn. If we look at the GFS model, this is the deterministic from the GFS. It's fairly much in agreement with the European model. A couple of differences. First of all, it's a little bit slower in time, okay? And the GFS goes out a little bit farther in time as well. So we can actually pick this up and see exactly what the deterministic does. So again, we're not going to see anything develop here on the GFS model in the Lesser Antilles. You can see the blues, which are kind of broader areas of low pressure. We don't have the wrapped up storm. And now we're getting into Thursday. Friday, early Saturday, we start to see the first signs right in here on the deterministic. And then you see it slipping over western Cuba and then moving up the eastern Gulf of Mexico and becoming a very strong storm into the panhandle of Florida here, fairly far out. I believe we're talking about, what, at least 10 days from now, okay? One more time on the GFS deterministic model. Once again, this would be an open area of showers and storms until the central Caribbean, where it then tries to wrap up, gets much stronger as it gets into the northwest Caribbean, near the Cuba, off of Yucatan, Cancun and Cozumel, and then really strengthening in the eastern Gulf. And again, we're looking at now basically 2 full weeks away. This is the ensemble members, 51 of them on the GFS. Their outputs, their solutions are even more widespread than the European model. They're still tightly clustered over the eastern Caribbean, Lesser Antilles. A couple ensemble members say, hey, I think we might get a storm closer to the Lesser Antilles, but not as many as the European model. We do see a little bit more of a northerly turn with some of those earlier, and then some of the stronger storms here get pushed into the Gulf of Mexico. But look how widespread the GFS is. So we really can't glean a lot out of the deterministic model trying to point it towards the panhandle of Florida, because your solutions are well off the east coast of the United States and all the way into Mexico. But again, the signal is there for this wave to develop, and that's the biggest takeaway. And because it's now farther south and west, the potential to impact more of our area is going to be there. All right, so let's break this down as of now. What hasn't changed, and it's fantastic news, is that we're still only at a 40% chance, okay? Thought it might be a little bit higher today, but it's not. It could still strengthen quickly, meaning that as it approaches the Lesser Antilles, it could wrap up into a depression or a tropical storm. Not expecting anything more than that in the Eastern Caribbean. So here are the areas that just need to monitor. Again, preps, are always great, but I don't think you have to be in prep mode at this point in time. I always tell you to check in with your local government and your local officials for any local messaging for anything that you might need to do. But these are the areas that need to monitor. The Lesser Antilles in general, the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, the ABC Islands, and Jamaica. All of these areas are either in the areas in orange or right close to them, okay? And again, our friends in the ABC Islands now are on the southern side. And that orange area is now far enough south where it actually eclipses Tobago, okay? Now look, ahead of this, we're still gonna get some good showers and storms. Let me show you the GFS deterministic model as far as the reflectivity, okay? Might take me 1 second here to fully load this up because I was, as I normally do, I was playing around with a couple of things on the models here. So if you haven't hit the like button yet, I'd really appreciate that. Let's see, I'll take it out. And again, we can go full model run here if we want to. Let me get rid of these winds. I was looking at the winds at the different levels of the atmosphere. 850 winds, which are kind of low, are still going to be out of the east. So if this system doesn't vertically stack, it will drive pretty far west. No doubt about it. So this is the deterministic model from the GFS. You're going to see, again, a storm wrap up and move into the panhandle of Florida. This is the reflectivity or rain associated with that deterministic model. What I really wanted to talk about here is how this plays out in the shorter term, okay? So for the Lesser Antilles, and I'm talking about Anguilla, all the way down towards Trinidad, Tobago, Antigua, Barbuda, Barbados, obviously included in this. We're gonna get some scattered rain the next couple of days, okay? As we get into early in the week, again, the first signs, not until the second, that we might start to have a little bit coming in. But I want to be clear, remember, this GFS deterministic model doesn't wrap a system here, okay? So you're not going to see anything more than a broad area of showers and storms, and I really hope that ends up being the case. It's clear to see where it is as we get towards midweek here, the 4th being Wednesday, right? But again, do we have a true center of circulation? It's possible. As we get into Friday, and then basically Thursday, Friday, that would be near Jamaica, And then it starts to wrap up towards the Cayman Islands, and we're talking about next weekend, about 7-8 days from now. And then the GFS does have it getting stronger as it heads towards the Panhandle of Florida, right? Potentially becoming a hurricane by then. But again, this is just one model run of the GFS, and I've already shown you how diverse the spread of model runs are. In the short term, right, would expect there to be early this week some pretty good rain and storms and wind across the Lesser Antilles, regardless of whether this is a depression or a tropical storm, okay? Some impacts for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola. It will all depend then on the track, okay? If it stays this far south, it will be influenced by Hispaniola, but not directly, meaning that it's not going to get knocked down in strength because the center is not going over the mountainous island. Jamaica, again, Thursday, Friday on this timeline, and then to the Northwest Caribbean, including the Cayman, Yucatan, Cuba, as we get into the weekend ahead. Again, that is the deterministic model. If I show you the winds associated with this, not on the vector though, let's do this. 10-meter winds, perfect. Okay, if I show you the winds with this, and it might take just a second to loop up, I'm going to dump the forecast area here. Actually, the easiest thing I think for me to do, because I only want to show you how strong it could get, is let's pause this. And I just want to bring on, see if I could bring on a single frame here. It might want to loop up before it lets me do a single frame. By telling it to loop, I might have not been able to pick a single frame. That's okay. It actually is looping up pretty quickly, and that's fine. So these are surface winds. And the clearest thing I just wanted to show you guys here is that, again, through the Central Caribbean, we don't see much as far as any big wrap up. This is where we start to see it get a little bit stronger, near Jamaica and then near the Cayman Islands. And there you go. Now you start to see a legitimate storm really getting going, all right? Again, we'll see if it takes that long for it to really wrap up, but eventually the GFS does have it wrapping up. And again, becoming potentially a hurricane in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, all right? When we look at the rainfall over the next 7 days, very impressive along this line. I think easily 4 to 6 inches of rain wherever this system goes. That's 100 to 150 millimeters. We could have some heavy rain, potentially some excessive rain for portions of the Lesser Antilles. Can't rule out the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. Can't rule out Hispaniola. I can't even rule out the ABC Islands. It would be good to get some healthy rain totals there. They would be on the south side, so potentially with a south wind, they'd get some of that. Obviously not influenced so far, at least, by what could be Francine. Would be some decent rainfall totals in the 50 to 100 millimeter range for portions of Central America and the Yucatan, and then some decent rainfall here for portions of the Bahamas as well. Give me just 1 second here, guys. I want to make sure. I want to go back here real quick to this. Kind of adjusting on the fly. I wanted to go back here because I also wanted to mention this storm, all right? So again, back over to the GFS. And for my friends here, I'm going to just take this back in time. We don't need to go this far out. For this area, okay, 20% chance of development over the next 7 days. This is one of those systems, it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, the tropical moisture is just going to continue to funnel into upper Texas and coastal Louisiana where they've had some very heavy rain, okay? Now, even if this thing does develop, it's going to move inland pretty quickly as it does. But just be aware of the excessive rainfall in the northwest side of the Gulf of Mexico, isolated to widespread flash flooding as possible. That's the biggest thing. This is a huge rainmaker for some of those areas, and we do have some viewers who watch us there. We're also going to get a good amount of rain through portions of the Bahamas. Again, not associated with this system, but just localized off of the northern side of that one tropical wave. Think Grand Bahama and New Providence and Andros are going to be pretty wet for the next few days ahead. Central, southeast sides of the islands into the Turks and Caicos, not as much. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out before we moved on. All right, again, 20% chance of development, 40% chance of development, 20% chance. All of them bear watching, but all of them bear watching for different reasons and for different time frames. But obviously this one here is the big one early next week and potentially throughout the entire week as it tracks across the Caribbean. So we already looked at the rainfall. This is going to be for my boating friends. Just please be very cautious, especially on the eastern sides of the Lesser Antilles, right? Just don't want to be too exposed by that. This wave watch is based off the GFS. So you're going to watch again early next week, the wind and the waves pick up across the Lesser Antilles, across central sides of the Caribbean, and then you can see that blow up in the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico in association with what would be a deepening area of low pressure, again, potentially a storm to a hurricane. But again, this is based off the GFS. And again, at the low levels, the easterlies continue, but the winds could be a big factor as well. Pretty strong winds heading towards Bermuda as well. All right, friends, that's the latest. Of course, I appreciate you guys liking this video, subscribing. You have a specific question about the forecast, leave it in the comments section below. You can also find us across all social media. We do some exclusive content on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram, X, Facebook. You want to send me a picture or video like Craig did of Cat Island today? Send it to myMediaMundo@gmail.com. Friends, have a great rest of your Friday. I'll be back tomorrow with all the newest information across the Caribbean and the Bahamas, and of course, the newest details on everything happening in the tropics. So until then, you have a great one. I'll see you soon right here at Meteo Mundo.